Jack had been traveling through space for days. Stars outside his ship's window were like glittering jewels. But today, he wasn't looking for treasure or adventure. He was just looking for food and supplies. His small cargo ship had limited space, and he needed to make sure he had enough to last another few months. He docked at an old space station, the kind of place where all kinds of strange beings gathered. The air smelled of spices, strange foods, and machine oil. The station was filled with busy vendors, alien creatures, and humans like himself, all walking through the marketplace with their eyes on the goods for sale. Jack's boots echoed as he walked down the narrow corridors, his eyes scanning the stalls for anything useful. He had been to many markets like this before, but this one was different. The quiet hum of machinery, the murmurs of alien languages, and the strange sights were starting to feel familiar, but today something felt off. It wasn't long before he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. In the center of the station, there was an auction. The kind of auction that Jack had heard about but had never seen in person. It wasn't for things. It was for beings. Sentient creatures who were bought and sold like commodities. Jack's stomach turned as he realized what was happening. He didn't want to get involved, but his curiosity got the best of him. He walked closer, trying to stay unnoticed. At the front of the auction, a large alien merchant stood, waving his hands to get the attention of the crowd. His eyes gleamed with greed, and the things he was selling were anything but ordinary. Then Jack saw her. She was standing in a cage, her wild eyes staring out at the crowd. Her fur was a mix of dark gray and black, and her features were clearly not human. She had the body of a woman, but with wolf-like features. Pointed ears, sharp fangs, those eyes were full of anger and pain. The merchant called out, his voice booming. Here we have a rare item, the last of the werewolf species. Strong, wild. And he paused for effect. Perfect. For your table. She's ready to be butchered. A rare delicacy. Jack's blood ran cold. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This alien werewolf girl wasn't for sale because she was valuable as a person. She was being sold for meat. He didn't know what angered him more, the fact that someone would do this to another being, or the fact that the crowd was actually interested. The auction continued, and the bidding started. Jack watched in horror as the price climbed higher and higher. He saw the greedy faces of the bidders, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from her. The girl in the cage looked helpless, but there was something more, something familiar. It wasn't just fear in her eyes. It was anger, too. A deep rage. Without thinking, Jack stepped forward. He had never done anything like this before, but something about the situation pulled at him. He had the credits to spare. He had saved up enough for something like this. He wasn't sure why, but he felt a deep need to act. I'll bid, Jack said, his voice firm. He stepped forward into the light, raising his hand. The crowd looked at him, and the auctioneer smiled. Ah, a new bidder. Excellent. Starting bid. 2,000 credits. The bidding continued for a few minutes, but Jack never looked away from the girl in the cage. She was breathing heavily. Now, her eyes still filled with anger and confusion. She didn't understand what was happening, and neither did he. But one thing was clear: she didn't deserve to be sold like this. Jack raised his hand again. 5,000 credits, he said, his voice clear. The crowd murmured, and the auctioneer's eyes widened. That's quite a generous offer. Sir, the auctioneer said, looking Jack over. But are you sure? This one's not like the others. She's dangerous. Jack didn't care. I'll take her, he said simply. The auctioneer smiled wickedly. Very well. The bidding ends at 5,000 credits. Congratulations, sir. You have yourself a rare prize. The crowd quickly dispersed, leaving Jack standing in front of the cage. The merchant unlocked it and stepped aside, allowing Jack to approach the girl. She didn't move at first. She was still angry, still filled with fear. But there was something else there now, a small spark of hope. Jack opened the cage slowly, not wanting to startle her. Hey, I'm not going to hurt you, he said softly. trying to sound reassuring. His voice was steady, but his heart was racing. He had no idea what to expect from her, but he knew he couldn't let her be harmed. For a moment, the werewolf girl didn't move. She just stared at him with those wild, haunting eyes. Then she growled softly, showing her sharp teeth. Jack took a step back. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." Her growl deepened, and Jack could see the muscles in her body tense. She was ready to fight, to run. But Jack didn't move closer. He kept his distance, respecting her space. After a long moment, she finally lowered her head, as if considering his words. Slowly she stepped out of the cage, her movements graceful, but cautious. "Good girl," Jack whispered, relieved that she hadn't attacked him yet. Wasn't sure what to do next, but one thing was clear. He had to get her away from here. He didn't know why he felt so protective of her, but he did. And now she was his responsibility. As they walked away from the auction, Jack couldn't help but glance over at her. The girl didn't say anything, but Jack could feel the tension in the air between them. She was still scared, but at least she wasn't alone anymore. They had a long journey ahead of them, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he might be doing something right. The walk back to Jack's ship was quiet. The girl didn't make a sound. Jack wasn't sure what to say to her, and she wasn't looking at him. Her eyes focused on the ground ahead. Her body was tense, and he could feel the anger and fear radiating. From her, Jack had hoped for a moment of peace, but the girl's silence only made him more anxious. He had bought her, but that didn't mean she trusted him. In fact, she probably hated him. He was just another human, just like the ones who had sold her in the first place. His mind raced with questions. Why had she been sold for meat? Why was she chained up in that market? Was she really just an animal to them? Or was there something more? And most importantly, what could he do to make sure she was safe? The sound of their footsteps echoed on the metal floors of the station. Jack's ship was docked in the far corner of the marketplace, a small and outdated vessel. But it was home for him. He could see the outline of it ahead. When they reached the ship, he stopped and turned to face her. She stood still, her wild eyes flicking around, taking in everything, every corner, every sound. Her ears twitched, and Jack noticed that she was almost as alert as a wolf on a hunt. She was constantly watching, always aware of her surroundings. "Come on, Jack," said gently, motioning for her to follow him. "We're almost there." The girl didn't move at first. She just stared at him with distrust. Jack sighed. He had expected this. How could she trust a human, especially after everything she had been through? Slowly, she took a step forward, then another. She was still cautious, but she was moving. When they finally reached the ship, Jack unlocked the door and stepped inside. He turned back to the girl who was still standing outside, staring at the small metal box. "You're safe here," Jack said. His voice was calm, trying to reassure her. "It's not much, but it's a place where no one will hurt you." She didn't respond, but after a long moment, she stepped inside the ship. The door slid shut behind her, and Jack led her to a small room. The walls were bare, and the air smelled faintly of machine oil, but it was quiet. Safe, at least for now. Jack took a step back. "You can sit, rest, whatever you need." The girl moved to a corner of the room and huddled against the wall, her eyes still watching him warily. Jack could see her muscles were tight, ready to spring at any moment. "If she felt threatened, look," Jack said, sitting down across from her. "I know you probably don't trust me, and I don't blame you, but I'm not here to hurt you. I just wanted to make sure you didn't end up as food for some alien merchant. You deserve better than that." The girl growled softly, a low warning sound that made Jack's heart race. He froze, holding up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not a threat, I promise. I'm just trying to help." She narrowed her eyes at him, but after a few moments, she stopped growling. Jack didn't move. He knew better than to push her too much. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Jack didn't know what else to say. He didn't know her name, didn't know anything about her. As all he knew was that she had been treated terribly, and somehow he had ended up with her. He was supposed to be the one helping her, but he felt just as lost as she did. Finally, Jack stood up. and moved toward a small food processor in the corner. "I'm going to make us something to eat," he said. "It's not fancy, but it's something." The girl didn't respond, but Jack heard her sniff the air. She was probably hungry, but she didn't trust the food. He didn't blame her. How could she know he wasn't trying to poison her? Jack decided to take it slow. He made the food and placed it on a small table in front of her. "If you're hungry, it's here," he said softly, stepping back. "But you don't have to eat it if you don't want to." For a long moment, the girl just stared at the food, her gaze flickering between it and Jack. Then slowly, she moved closer to the table. Jack didn't make a sound, just stood back and waited. The girl sniffed the food, her sharp nose twitching as she carefully inspected it. Finally, she took a small bite, then another. She paused, her eyes still wary. But the tension in her body began to ease. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Jack smiled quietly, glad that she was eating. He sat back down across from her, not wanting to push any further. He wasn't sure what her next move would be, but he knew that this was a step forward. She had trusted him, even if just a little bit. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out where to go," Jack said softly. "But for now, you can rest." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened just a little. Jack felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe they weren't so different after all. They were both just trying to survive in a universe that didn't always make sense. As the girl ate quietly, Jack watched her, trying to understand her. She wasn't just some animal or wild creature. She had a story, a past that Jack couldn't even begin to understand. And somewhere, deep inside, she was still a person who had been hurt, a person who needed time. Jack stood up slowly, not wanting to disturb her. "I'm going to sleep. You can take the bed if you want. I'll take the floor." The girl didn't look up from her food, but she didn't protest. Jack moved to the side of the room and lay down on the floor, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like he was doing the right thing. He closed his eyes, wondering what would happen next. The days that followed were strange, to say the least. Jack had expected the girl to be angry, or to try to escape. But instead, she stayed in the room, watching him with wary eyes. She didn't trust him, and he understood that. He wouldn't trust him either if he were in her shoes. Jack kept his distance, giving her space. He made sure to leave food in the room every few hours, and over time, the girl ate a little more each day. She still didn't speak. She barely made any sound at all, except for an occasional growl or low noise when something startled her. Never pushed her, simply respected her boundaries, even though he wished for her to trust him. After a week, Jack decided to take the next step. The planet they were headed to wasn't too far off. It was a small settlement that sold supplies and offered a safe place for travelers to rest. Jack needed to stop for fuel and some repairs. But he also felt it was the right time to try and get the girl to leave the ship, just for a little while. She needed to see that the world outside wasn't all danger. "Come on," Jack said one morning, standing in the doorway. "We're almost there. It'll be safe."
Ow.
The girl, sitting in the corner, didn't look up. Jack sighed and stepped into the room, a little closer than he usually did. He didn't want to scare her, but he needed to try. He held out a hand, though he knew she wouldn't take it. "You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything you don't want to." "Do," Jack continued. "But you can come with me. Just to the settlement. It'll be different, I promise." The girl's eyes followed his movements, but she didn't make a move to stand. She was still unsure of him, still too scared to trust him. He couldn't blame her. It would take time. Jack left the room for a moment, giving her some time to think. He returned shortly with a bag of supplies and a coat for her. She hadn't worn much, except the torn clothes she had been wearing at the auction. Jack wanted to make sure she had something more comfortable, something that might help her feel safer. "I know you don't trust me," he said, sitting down a little farther away from her this time. "But I won't hurt you. I just want to help." The girl still didn't respond. Her ears twitched slightly, and Jack could tell she was thinking. Slowly, she stood up. Jack was careful not to make any sudden movements, keeping his voice calm. "You'll be fine," Jack reassured her. "Just follow me." Don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I'll be right there with you." The girl hesitated for a long time, and Jack thought she might refuse. But then, with a soft growl, she took a cautious step toward him. Jack felt a surge of relief. He stood and led the way out of the ship. The air outside was cooler than he had expected, but it was quiet. The settlement was small, with only a few buildings that looked like they had been there for years. There were people walking around, a mix of humans and aliens, each going about their day. No one seemed to take much notice of Jack or the girl, which was exactly what Jack wanted. The girl stayed close behind him, her steps hesitant. She looked around with wide eyes, taking in every detail, her ears flicking at every sound. Jack kept his eyes on her, watching for any signs that she might be getting overwhelmed. He wasn't sure how much she had seen of the world outside her cage, but this was the first time she had been free to explore on her own. "Just a little longer," Jack said quietly, glancing at her. "We're almost at the supply shop then. We can go back to the ship. It's safe." The girl didn't say anything, but she followed Jack as he made his way to a small store at the end of the street. He could feel her watching everything around her, her body stiff, ready for anything. Jack didn't blame her. The world outside was still new and frightening to her. Inside the store, Jack grabbed a few supplies. He made sure to pick up some food for her, some basic things she might need. As he moved around the shelves, he noticed that the shopkeeper, an old alien with tentacles for arms, was eyeing the girl curiously. Jack quickly finished gathering what he needed and paid for the items. "Let's go back now," Jack said softly. The girl didn't argue. When they left the shop and made their way back to the ship, Jack noticed that the girl seemed a little less tense. Her movements were still cautious, but there was a small shift in the way she carried herself. As stiff as before, she seemed to have relaxed, just a little. Back on the ship, Jack set the supplies down and turned to her. "See, that wasn't so bad." The girl didn't respond, but Jack could tell that something had changed. Wasn't as afraid of the outside world anymore. Maybe it had been a small step, but it was something. The girl looked at Jack for a long moment, and then, to his surprise, she walked over to the food table and sniffed the meal he had prepared for her. She hesitated before finally eating, her movements more relaxed than they had been before. Jack smiled, feeling like maybe he was starting to break through the wall she had built around herself. "I'm not perfect," Jack said quietly, sitting down at the table across from her. "But I'm trying, and if you ever need anything, I'll be here." Then, the girl finished her meal without a word, but Jack noticed she didn't push the plate away. She didn't run or hide in the corner. For the first time, she seemed a little more comfortable around him. As the day went on, Jack thought about how far they had come. They'd made it this far together, and maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to trust each other. Jack sat at the small table in his ship, watching the girl. Her name he still hadn't learned, but Jack didn't mind. He could tell that it was going to take time. She wasn't ready to speak yet, and he respected that. He was willing to wait. To be patient. For the past few days, they had been quiet together. Jack would go about his daily routine, making food, checking the ship's systems, and taking care of his supplies. The girl would stay in the corner of the room, watching him but rarely moving. It was as if she was still waiting for the moment, when she would have to escape, or when the world would prove that nothing was safe. But Jack had noticed something. Every day, she was becoming a little less tense. She would sit up straighter, glance at him from time to time, and eat without the same wariness that had once been there. It wasn't much, but it was progress. The ship's computer beeped, signaling that they were getting closer to their next destination. Jack had planned to stop at a nearby station for repairs. It was a routine stop for him, but today he felt a strange sense of unease. It was like something was watching him, something he couldn't quite place. When the ship docked, Jack did his usual rounds, checked the fuel levels, and made sure the ship was in good shape. As he walked back to the cabin, he saw the girl standing in the hallway, staring out the window. Her eyes were narrowed, her expression serious. "Wrong?" Jack asked, walking over to her. He hadn't seen her like this before. She had always been quiet, but now she seemed alert, almost ready to act. The girl didn't look at him. She just stared out the window. Jack followed her gaze, but all he could see was the station below, a small collection of buildings and ships. Nothing out of the ordinary. Are you feeling okay? Jack asked, taking a step closer. You've been acting different since we docked? The girl turned to face him, her eyes filled with something Jack couldn't quite understand. It wasn't fear. It was more like ... recognition, as if something about the station felt familiar to her. Jack stepped back, sensing that she was about to say something. But instead, she simply shook her head as if deciding not to speak. She turned back toward the window, her posture rigid. Jack stood there for a moment, uncertain. He had no idea what was going through her mind, but he wasn't going to push her to talk. She needed to trust him first, and that would take time. He turned to leave. But before he could take another step, there was a knock at the door. It was light, but it was persistent. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Wasn't expecting anyone. He'd made sure to keep a low profile at this station. His ship wasn't special. It wasn't like anything that would attract attention. Still, something about this felt wrong. He glanced at the girl. She had tensed up again, her eyes wide. Jack motioned for her to stay back and move toward the door. He opened it slowly, cautiously. Standing outside was a tall alien, its features covered in a long hooded cloak. Jack couldn't see its face, but it was obvious that the being was waiting for something. Can I help you? Jack asked, his voice calm but with a hint of uncertainty. The alien stepped forward, lowering its hood. It was a strange creature, with smooth, pale skin and black eyes that seemed to swallow the light. Its voice was deep, but soft. I've been looking for someone, it said. Jack's stomach dropped. He hadn't expected this. He tried to keep his face neutral, but his mind raced. Was it looking for the girl? Had they tracked her here? Alien's eyes shifted to the girl, still standing by the window. Jack quickly moved to block the view, but it was too late. The creature had already seen her. Her, the alien said, its voice a cold whisper. I knew I would find her eventually. Girl stiffened, her body shaking with fear. Jack quickly stepped in front of her, trying to shield her from the alien's gaze. His heart was pounding now. This was bad. This was very bad. Who are you? Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The alien tilted its head, its eyes narrowing. I am part of a group, it said. A group that knows the true value of what you have. That creature is not just any being. She's a weapon that was lost to us. And now it seems she's been found. Jack's mind raced. A weapon? What was this creature talking about? Look, I don't know what you're talking about, Jack said, trying to keep calm. But whatever it is, I'm not giving her to you. The alien's smile was cold and sharp. You misunderstand. I don't need your permission. I just need her. Before Jack could react, the alien lunged toward the girl. But in that split second, the girl reacted first. She moved like a blur, faster than Jack had ever seen. A flash, she was on top of the alien, her sharp claws pressing against its throat. The alien gasped, unable to move. Jack froze, shocked at the speed and strength the girl had. She wasn't just some helpless being. She was powerful, dangerous. I told you, she whispered, her voice low and growling. No one controls me. Stood there, wide-eyed, watching the girl. For the first time, he realized how much more there was to her than he had understood. She was not just a victim. She was something else, something dangerous. And if anyone thought they could take her, they were wrong. The alien, gasping for breath, raised its hands in surrender. I didn't mean to offend you. The girl's eyes glowed with fury, but after a long moment, she released the alien and stepped back. Jack rushed to her side, keeping a hand on her shoulder. Are you okay? Jack asked, his voice trembling slightly. The girl nodded, but she didn't say anything. Jack knew then that this was just the beginning. There was so much more to her past, and it wasn't going to be easy for either of them. But whatever came next, Jack knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt her again. The alien stood up slowly, his hands still raised in surrender. The girl, her eyes still glowing with anger, watched him carefully, her body tense as though she were ready to pounce again. Jack, standing beside her, felt the weight of the situation sink in. This wasn't just some ordinary encounter. They had made enemies, and it wasn't over. The alien took a step back, his gaze fixed on the girl. "You're powerful," he said, his voice trembling. "But we didn't come here to fight. You." "Then why are you here?" Jack asked, his voice sharp. "What do you want with her?" The alien's dark eyes shifted, and for a moment, Jack could see a flicker of something behind them, fear perhaps. "She's not just any ordinary being," he said, his voice quieter now. "She's part of a project, a weapon, a creation, of a power that wants to control the galaxy." The girl growled softly, her lips curling back, her fangs gleaming in the low light. Jack stepped in front of her, trying to protect her, though he wasn't sure who or what he was protecting her from. His mind raced as he processed what the alien was saying. "You're not taking her," Jack said firmly. "You're not taking anyone. Not today." The alien gave a small, bitter laugh. "You don't understand. We've been searching for her 4 years. She's the key to unlocking a power that can crush entire civilizations. You've made a mistake, thinking you can keep her safe." Jack felt the weight of the alien's words. The girl wasn't just a victim, she was something far more dangerous, something that others would kill to possess. "We're leaving," Jack said, his voice more confident than he felt. "You're not welcome here." The alien's gaze flicked between Jack and the girl. "If you think you can escape, you're mistaken. You'll never be safe. There's nowhere in the galaxy that can hide you from us." Before Jack could respond, the alien suddenly turned and disappeared into the shadows. Jack's heart raced. He had no idea who this alien was or who he represented. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. The girl was still standing behind him, her breath coming in shallow, controlled gasps. Her body was poised, ready to act at any moment. "You all right?" Jack asked, turning to her, but she didn't answer. She just nodded, though her eyes were distant, as if lost in thought. Jack knew they couldn't stay in one place for too long. Whoever these people were, they were powerful, and they wouldn't stop searching for her. He had to keep her safe. "Going to take you somewhere?" Jack said. "A place where they can't find us?" The girl met his gaze for the first time in days. For a moment, there was a flicker of something trust, maybe, or maybe just understanding. Whatever it was, Jack saw it, and it gave him a sense of hope. The journey to the next planet was long, but Jack knew it was their best chance at escaping the threat. He had heard rumors of a hidden settlement, a place where those who wanted to stay hidden could find shelter. It wasn't much, but it was a place far from the prying eyes of the galaxy's most dangerous people. The journey wasn't easy. Girl still wasn't fully trusting of Jack, and she didn't speak much, but she didn't run either. She stayed close, and every now and then, Jack would catch a glimpse of her eyes watching him, studying him. He couldn't help but wonder what was going on in her mind. Was she remembering her past? Was she wondering who she really was? As they approached the hidden settlement, Jack could feel a strange mix of excitement and fear. He didn't know what to expect, but he hoped it would be a safe place for them to lay low for a while. He couldn't imagine what the girl had been through, and all he wanted was for her to be free of the people who had been hunting her. When they arrived, the settlement looked peaceful. It was small, hidden within a dense forest on the planet's surface. The buildings were simple but well kept, and there were no signs of danger. It seemed like a place where people could truly disappear. Jack guided the girl inside one of the buildings. It was warm inside, and there were people already. They were a mix of humans and aliens, all living quietly and going about their lives. No one seemed to pay much attention to them, which Jack was grateful for. He needed to keep a low profile. A woman at the counter greeted them warmly. She was tall, with dark skin and bright green eyes. "You're new here," she said, smiling. "What can I do for you?" "I need to stay here for a while," Jack said, his voice steady. "It's just the two of us." The woman glanced at the girl, then back at Jack. There was a moment of silence, and Jack could see the woman's eyes flicker with recognition. She knew something about the girl, but she didn't ask any questions. "We have rooms," the woman said, "I can get you settled in?" "Thank you," Jack said, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in a long while, he felt like they might actually be safe. As the woman showed them to a small room, Jack noticed the girl's expression. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something different. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the first step toward understanding that things could be different. Jack set down the bag he was carrying and turned to the girl. "You can rest here," he said softly. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." The girl didn't speak, but she nodded and sat down on the bed. Jack left the room, giving her some space. He needed to figure out what to do next. They couldn't stay in this place forever, but for now, it was a safe haven. Jack knew that the fight was far from over. It would have to keep moving, keep hiding, and always be one step ahead of the people who wanted to use her for their own purposes. But for now, he had something more important: time. And he wasn't going to waste it. The days that followed were peaceful. Too peaceful, Jack thought, as he sat in the small room, staring out at the forest surrounding the settlement. It had been a few weeks since they arrived, and the girl, who still hadn't spoken, had slowly begun to settle in. The tension in her body had lessened, though Jack could tell she was still haunted by her past. Jack had given her space, not wanting to force anything. But he couldn't ignore the feeling that time was running out. They couldn't stay hidden forever. The people who had been looking for her would eventually find them. The girl had spent her days walking around the settlement, though she always kept her distance from the other inhabitants. She wasn't ready to trust anyone other than Jack. Every time someone tried to approach her, she would move away, her eyes filled with caution. Jack could understand her hesitation. She had been through too much already to let her guard down easily. One afternoon, Jack went to the small market in the settlement to buy some food. It was a quiet place, where most of the traders were friendly and didn't ask too many questions. Jack preferred it that way. The last thing he needed was attention. As he walked through the market, Jack overheard a conversation between two traders. They were talking about a group of bounty hunters that had been seen in the area. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Bounty hunters? In this remote place? Couldn't ignore the feeling of dread that washed over him. Didn't know for sure, but he had a bad feeling. He quickly finished his shopping, paid for the food, and made his way back to the room he and the girl were staying in. When he arrived, the girl was sitting by the window, her eyes fixed on the outside world. She had been like this more often. Lately, watching the trees sway in the breeze, lost in her thoughts. "Hey," Jack said softly, stepping into the room. "I've got food." She didn't move at first. Then, after a few seconds, she turned her head to look at him. Jack noticed the way her eyes seemed distant, as if she were seeing something far away. He could tell she was still processing everything. That had happened. "Are you okay?" Jack asked, his voice gentle. The girl didn't answer. She just looked at him for a moment before standing up and walking over to the table where he had set the food. Jack watched her, feeling a sense of helplessness. He didn't know what to do. He didn't have all the answers, but he couldn't just sit here and wait for trouble to find them. He placed a hand on her shoulder, something he had never done before. "We'll be fine," he said, trying to reassure her. "We have time. We can figure this out." We didn't respond to his touch, but Jack didn't take it as rejection. She was simply not used to being cared for. It would take time. That night, as they sat together eating the meal Jack had prepared, the quiet of the settlement seemed to still. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. He didn't know how, but he could feel it in the air. The girl seemed to sense it too, her body tense as she ate, her eyes scanning the room as though expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "I'm going to find out what's going on," Jack said, standing up after they had finished. "Eating? Stay here. Don't leave the room." The girl nodded, though she didn't speak. Jack didn't want to leave her alone, but he knew he needed to get more information. The settlement was small, and it wasn't hard to find the local authorities. He made his way to the central building, where the leaders of the settlement usually gathered. Inside, a group of people was sitting around a table, talking in hushed voices. When Jack walked in, they all looked up, their faces tense. "What's going on?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I overheard something about bounty hunters. One of the men at the table, an older alien with blue skin, nodded gravely. We've heard rumors. Bounty hunters are looking for someone, probably for a price. They're getting closer. Jack's stomach tightened. He knew that someone could only mean one thing. The girl? Have you heard anything more specific? Jack pressed. The woman sitting across from him, a human with dark hair, shook her head. We don't know who's after her, but it's clear they'll stop at nothing. They're getting more dangerous. Jack felt a cold shiver run down his spine. What do we do? The older alien stood up. We've set up a few escape routes out of here in case anyone comes looking for trouble. We've protected this settlement for a long time, but we're not invincible. Jack clenched his fists. The reality of the situation was sinking in. They couldn't stay here. Not if bounty hunters were closing in. Where are the escape routes? Jack asked, determined. I'm not letting them take her. We'll go tonight. Group exchanged uncertain looks. It's dangerous, the older alien said. The routes lead into the mountains, but they're not easy to navigate. If the bounty hunters find us, it'll be hard to escape. Jack nodded. We don't have a choice. If we stay here, we're as good as caught. The group agreed reluctantly, and they began to make preparations. Jack's mind was focused entirely on the girl. He knew she wasn't ready for what was coming, but he had no choice but to prepare her. When Jack returned to the room, the girl was still sitting by the window, staring out into the night. Her eyes met his when he entered, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something fear. We need to leave, Jack said, his voice low. It's not safe here anymore. The girl stood up, her body tense, but she didn't question him. She simply nodded and followed him to the door. Jack didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't let anyone take her from him. Together, they would find a way to survive.